So, welcome to another episode of Crap No One Tells You. With me today is Adam from Stark Marketing. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Um, so, we don't really beat around the bush here. So, let's start the conversation with what is some crap no one tells you about digital marketing?
That is a very good and very broad question. I mean, I imagine I could rattle off, 5,000 things here, but let me start with the basic one, right?
Hmm.
In today's world, especially startup entrepreneurs, they think digital marketing, advertising in general is a switch that you flip, right? You sort of flip a switch, you
Uh-huh.
turn it on, you run Facebook ads, you run Google ads, and profits start rolling in. The truth is, especially over the past decade, Meta and Google make it very easy for you to spend money on platforms, right? Like that's their business model. Their business model is ease of use on platforms, and way too many business owners and entrepreneurs focus on platform execution rather than marketing fundamentals, right? Like so they go straight into advertising way before they should.
Right.
Your average company on the ground should be spending an inordinate amount of time working out what their value propositions are, who their target audience is, how they're going to reach them, what their messaging is, and do all of that foundational level of work before they should be rushing into digital marketing and advertising. And here at Stark, we work with a pretty broad range of clients. So we work with some clients who are extremely sophisticated, the Mattels of the world, Thomas and Barbie, and you name it, and they know exactly what they're doing, and we are there to execute for them at a platform level. But we also work with mid-market companies, and you would be surprised how well you probably wouldn't be surprised, but the people out there listening would be surprised how many successful companies go way too quickly into advertising without doing a foundational level of work, and they're always surprised when they come to us that my answer is usually not yet. Like they're
Right.
willing to pay us, they're willing to get going, and I'm always like, we're not ready yet. Like we need to do A, B, and C before we get to D. So
Right.
that was the thing that jumped out top of mind when you said what is some of the shit no one tells you. It's that, advertising is extremely effective, digital marketing is extremely effective, but there's a lot of work that happens off platform before you get on platform.
Right. It's like you got to put the horse before the buggy, so to speak, right? Like you can't just take the buggy and expect it to work miracles, even though I don't know about in your case, but there's this. Oh yeah, all I have to do is run an AdWords campaign for $1,000 a month, and I'll be good. And we're like, I'm no, that's not how it works.
Yep. Well, it's funny, I mean, because you know, marketing hasn't changed in 100 years. I mean, I would say 1,000 years. Like the medium has changed, but marketing
Right.
is the same, right? It's still product, offer, audience, delivery mechanism, ability to convert, right? Like so,
Hmm.
200 years ago, your way of marketing would be standing on a corner, yelling about the product that you had or putting up print ads or, getting a billboard out there. And then 60 years ago, it was television and radio and print. And then,
Hmm.
20 years ago, it became Google and retail and the rest of it. And, so strategically, things have not changed. You're still sort of following the same format of who's the audience, what's the product, what's the offer, how do I engage them, where do they go, and how do they convert. Now, like you said with like Google ads, it's like, okay, I throw a Google ad up for $1,000 a month. Well, who's clicking? What's the
Right.
cost per click? Where are they going next? When you do the work, like
What's the
how do
message?
you, what's the message? Can you project outcomes based on the data you have available to understand whether that's the right format for you?
Hmm. And it's one of the things that I found striking because you were saying about like ease of platform, right? So we manage a couple of AdWords campaigns on a smaller level. And the thing that always blows my mind is Google now has in their AdWords thing this recommendation thing, right? Where you have to keep your score above a certain level, like
Yep.
you get rewards for keeping it. And then I'm looking at some of these recommendations and I'm like, where are these coming from?
Yep.
Right? Like, yes, it's super easy to use, but some of it makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, it's the trap, right? Like, I mean, ease of use is one thing, and I like how easy they've made platforms, and they
Mhm.
continually continue to streamline and make them easier to use because it democratizes the ability for entrepreneurs and business owners to have access to advertising, right? Like, you're probably like me, where you remember when Ads Manager first launched for Meta, in what 2013, 2014, somewhere
Yep.
around there, and it was a nightmare to use. I mean, if you didn't have a brain for advertising, or you weren't willing to take the time to invest in it and learn it, there was a really high barrier to entry for most people. I mean, it was like reading a different language.
Right.
Now, with the help of, self-help things like YouTube videos and the rest of it, most people can wrap their heads around the mechanism of how to run advertising, which I think is a good thing because it allows you to focus more time on what really drives ad campaigns, which is creative messaging, value propositions, the rest of it. The drawback to that is people will now treat platform recommendations as Bible, right? Like, so with like Google recommending certain things, or,
Mhm.
Meta recommending certain things, it's easy to fall into the trap of saying, because they've made it easy for me, this is what I should be doing. Where you have to be looking at everything with a critical eye, even if it's recommendations directly from the platform.
Right. So, not to age myself, but um, I remember when the AdWords platform first launched and working in that.
Yep.
Um, and that was fascinating because I mean it's fundamentally stayed the same, but a lot of the features that used to be there are no longer there, and it's definitely been made more user friendly, right? And then I see all these Google service recommended and Google auto ads, and I'm like, these companies have basically what Amazon did to consumers, one click purchase.
Yep.
A lot of these media giants are now doing for the consumer or for the business owner to spend ads. It's like one click advertising.
Yep.
And
And
like you said, what gets forgotten is the message, is the what are you putting out there? Why are you allowing Google to come up with auto recommended ads? Like,
yeah, it's for sure. I mean, and I know you've been spending a lot of time talking about AI on your platforms, and
mhm,
tools like ChatGPT and whatnot, and that sort of amplifies it, right? Like, there's a lot of utility that is extremely strong. For the ability for me to pop something into ChatGPT. You walk out onto my floor, and 50% of the computers at any time of the day have ChatGPT open, or at least on a second screen, and people are using it, and it's fantastic. Like, I
mhm,
encourage use of it where utility makes sense, right? So you
right,
pop in an ad and you say, "Give me 10 variations of this," or you enter a concept and you say, "Turn this into 15 variations of a Google ad," or whatever it is, and that's fantastic. However, we're not at the point yet where you can separate a human brain from interpreting the information that comes out to you, thinking holistically about the big picture and understanding whether that makes sense as a part of that campaign.
right. I tell people all the time that these AI tools and all that stuff, they're tools, right? Just like if you are a programmer, you probably have GitHub open half the
Yep,
time, right? On a second screen. And the people that know what they're doing, like if you know what the expected outcome should be, it's very easy to use these tools. If you don't know what the outcome should be, you end up with unusable stuff, but you think you can use it,
yep,
right? Like that seems to be the trend. And um, I was talking to someone about it the other day, and I said, you're going to start seeing a ton of small businesses all putting out massive amounts of generic content. Like it's coming, right? Because we everybody's been told, oh, digital marketing, content is king. You got to put content out there. And as much as I agree that it's going to be a quantity game as much as it is a quality game, the problem is when you get so much mediocre content out there, then people are going to be like, but why isn't it working? I'm
yep.
doing the quantity part, right?
Yep. Well, what's interesting, our marketing director, David, and I were having this conversation the other day, towards the end of the day, just chit chatting. And, what we were talking about was it's one thing to get content and information out there. And, these AI tools, they do a lot of that really well, and it's going to increasingly get better. However, what it cannot do is replace your personal perspective on a specific situation, right? Like, so whether you're in advertising or marketing or creating content in a different lane, in a myriad of businesses, your experience in the marketplace, your unique view of looking at things, your perspective is what people are looking for. It's why they go to these different content creators. I mean, imagine if Wikipedia was the major driver of content, right? Where like all that popped out was wiki information. I remember, Wikipedia started blowing up when I was in college, and there was this huge backlash to Wikipedia where you couldn't reference it in college essays and the rest of it. But now Wikipedia is like generally trusted as a pretty reliable source of information. But that's exactly what it is. It's information, not perspective. So the AI language modeling can source information on a myriad of topics in digital advertising, programmatic, and the rest of it. But what it cannot do is give you Adam Benjamin or Gummy's perspective on that based on their personal experiences, right? So it's like goes back to what you said. There's crowdsourcing information and then having a language model deliver what they believe is most reliable to that end user,
Mhm.
not dissimilar from Google search engine optimization a decade ago, figuring out how to try and rank pages that were more relevant to the search query than pages before. It's sort of a similar concept. However, that does not replace, I think people are conflating two things that really live quite independently at this point. Where this goes, who knows? It's hard for me to even project what AI looks like a decade from now,
Mhm.
but we're still at a point where, in my perspective, these are two very different siloed buckets.
Yeah. I mean, we have started building tools already, utilizing AI. And what we're finding is what it's really good at is if there is a vast library of information available on the subject, it is really good at parsing that out, assuming you feed it good information, especially on the marketing side, right? So, like, we tested it the other day. We were doing a competitive analysis between a client and some of the competitors. And all the competitors, like, these are all companies that have been around for a while. And we were actually amazed at having it do a competitive analysis. And
Yep.
we were like, that's pretty spot on. Like,
Yep.
was it complete? No. Was it a great start? Absolutely. And I think that's also where, like, people tend to forget with marketing that yes, it's you, yes, it's your message, yes, it's all that stuff, but it's also where do you fit in the marketplace, right? Like if you don't understand um, where there's a gap in the market, where do you fit? How do you compare to your competitors? Like what's your not I hate the unique selling proposition because it's really not a unique selling proposition. It's really more of a unique selling angle, right? So I'll give you an example. When I started Red Knight, people used to ask me, "Oh, you're an agency," and I was like, "No, I'm not an agency." And they're like, "Oh, so you're freelancers?" And I'm like, "No, we're not freelancers." I'm like, "We fit right in that tiny space between the agencies and the freelancers, where you don't want to work with freelancers anymore because they might be unreliable, but you're not quite yet at the point where you want to hire an agency that works for you and you have to send a check to every month." Right? Like we fill that gap. But it took me 3.5 years of running the company before I realized that was really the gap we were filling and that gap even existed,
Yep.
right? With other businesses, especially like the smaller businesses, the plumbers, the HVAC guys, right? Are they really doing a lot of things differently? Are you really doing something different than the guy next to you? Probably not. You're both
Yeah.
installing water heaters. You're like, so what makes you different? Right? And that's always that hard thing as a marketer, right? What makes you different?
Yeah, and that that's the thing where I love that analogy you drew. When I think about a business and I think about like how you position a brand, right? Like
Mhm.
that obviously you have your core service. This is your core competency, and it's table stakes that you do that well, right? Like, so whether you are a massive law firm with 75 partners, whether you are the local plumber guy, who is going to be able to get to someone's house and take care of a problem quickly, like it's table stakes that you are good at what you specifically do. The way I speak to brands about this is I say, when I say make what makes you different, it's not always what's the differentiator in your service set or your product,
Mhm.
but there are ancillary parts of the business that rotate around the brand. Like if you're the local plumber, do you pick up the phone when someone calls you? Like, are you there when you say you're going to be there? All these other things tie into what makes a company or a person special that is outside of just the core product, right? So
Right.
if you're the guy who does not pick up phone calls, says you're going to be there at 11, is there at 12:30, tells the person that this is going to be a $600 job and it becomes a $1,200 job. All of those things point directly to who your brand and the value you provide to that end consumer. So I
Mhm.
think there's a way of entrepreneurs sort of reframing how they view themselves in their company that's not just specifically based on their core offering, but the value that they provide to the person corresponded with the marketplace.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I often tell people, I use the analogy of like it your brand is your personality, right? Like if I had to describe Adam, Adam's a guy, right? But that's really not a descriptor, right? But that would be the descriptor of I'm a plumber.
Yep.
What you really makes you different is who you are. Like what makes you you. And it's often when we talk to people and explain it to them on that level, they go, "Oh, so you mean like, the courteous thing or being respectful?" And I'm like, "Yes, those are the things that are the core of your brand, right? Not the, oh, I have better tools. I have
Yep.
this newest equipment." Well, great. Why? Why do you have that, right? What's your brand? What's your promise, so to speak? Like, who
Yep.
am I dealing with?
Look,
So,
I'll give you an example. We were talking to we're in talks with a company right now, and they essentially do kitchen bathroom remodels, and they've scaled pretty quickly in the past 5-6 years. They've now got 7 locations across California. They're doing $7.5-8 million a year in revenue, and they've really refined and honed their process. So when we were chatting with their CEO and their owner, one of the things that they told me was, one, they're not the cheapest, that they're not the most
mhm,
expensive, but they're probably right about, they're right under the most expensive options in the market. But they never overquote a project. They're never late on a project. And for every day that they're late on a project, they pay the homeowner $250 a day. So they have incentivized and structured their business in a way where, with confidence, they can tell the person at the end of the day that if we do a job for you, it's going to be done on budget and on time. Right now, I'm sure you've hired contractors for different things. I have hired
yeah,
contractors for different things. And I know from my understanding of that marketplace, both anecdotally, but also just surveying what's out there, it is par for the course that projects run over the allotted time period and over budget with regular consistency, right?
yes,
So what this company has done has they have segmented themselves away from the competition, even though they offer similar products, because the quality of their work, clearly it's good, but it's not the only differentiator, because you can also find other people who do quality work. But they have made the promise that we are never over budget and we're never over time, and they have structured their incentive packages in the form of payment to prove that and give the end consumer confidence in the outcome.
that's actually honestly, that's pretty impressive because I don't know if you've ever had a kitchen remodel or been part of one, but there's always like the countertop guy is a day late
Yep.
or the wrong cabinets show up. Like that's a pretty having figured out that process is pretty impressive by itself. But that's like a great differentiator to be able to literally make that promise.
Yep. And that's something that, like, really every company can do, The problem is, they have to want to do it and they have to commit to it, right?
Correct.
Like you can make the promise, but you have to live up to that promise.
Correct. Because now if you break that, it's not about the $250, it's about, well, yeah, I got 500 bucks, yay, but they weren't on time,
That's exactly right.
right? So, interesting. So, let me ask you another question, unrelated. How did you end up in marketing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I've always dabbled in a combination of advertising, marketing, and sales. So I found myself in the early to mid 2000s working in the music industry, and I was doing a lot of consulting for labels, brands, different artists. And this was right around the time that I think collectively many of us were getting the understanding that we can use this social media thing for business application outside of what it was being used for at
Was
the time.
was that like early MySpace?
It was MySpace days. Yeah,
Okay.
this is pre-Facebook at scale,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So, I started working with a lot of entertainers and artists on how they can leverage social to build their personal brands and reduce their dependency on record labels, because at that time, the record labels were the key gatekeepers in how artists
Mhm.
blew up, their connection to their fans and their audience and the rest of it, and we were starting to learn, no, there's a lot that artists can do outside of the label and the budgets allocated to them, and take control of their careers and matters into their own hands. So I started working, with several artists, and that sort of just naturally led to a place where brands started coming to me looking for consulting on social. Back then, it wasn't paid social; it was channel strategy, because
Right.
paid social was not a thing. And I started to realize, like there's something here. I've always been entrepreneurial. I've started multiple businesses in my lifetime, some successful, some not. And my brother and I, we always wanted to go into business together. And one, I really loved this work, but doing it all myself, I realized there was a cap. Essentially, my ability to grow a company capped at the number of hours I had in a day and a week. And in order to really like build this up, offer value to the public, but also build a successful organization, we had to create something that was scalable.
Mhm.
So, Richard and I, he's my brother, our COO and co-founder. We made a decision. One day, we both quit our jobs. I quit first. He quit a
Okay.
month later. We downsized our lifestyle significantly, sold expensive cars, bought cheaper cars, fully self-funded, didn't take on any debt, didn't raise money, lived within our means, and started just two of us in a WeWork. From that point, we got to a point where I was selling and overseeing strategy, he was executing and doing fulfillment. We realized really quickly I was bringing in more than one person could fulfill. We're going to need somebody else. We hired a full-time lead designer, and then we just sort of scaled up from there.
Okay. So how long have you now been out on your own?
It's been about 8 years, 8.5, 9 years.
Okay.
Every time someone asks me that question, I forget. I'm so
I know.
obsessed on like today and tomorrow, and I spend so little time thinking about yesterday that I think I've probably been saying 6 years for about 8 years, and now I'm
Yeah.
saying 8 years for about 10 years. So we'll see.
It's say I said 10 years for I don't know how long, and then I looked at the calendar the other day and, like, we were doing some work, and it actually had our founding date in it, and I'm
Yep.
like, "Oh, I guess it's, like, 17 years, not
Yeah.
10." But, so when the 2 of you got together, so you were more the sales front concept guy, and he was more the back end execution technical? Is that
Yep.
how it worked?
Yep, that's exactly right. There was a stage where we had built a network of freelancers and
Mhm.
contractors that we would use on a project basis. Now, as our company's grown, we do everything in house. Because at that stage we were working with smaller companies where it was easier to plug in freelancers for very specific topics. Now, as we've started working with Fortune 100, Fortune 500, companies, and uh, either venture backed or self funded startups, the needs for consistency in work as well as just attention on a daily basis is increased. So we've built out the team accordingly. And now, I do things like this, and then I have people who are actually doing the work at the company.
Right. So, is your focus primarily paid social stuff now, or what is it that you guys do?
Yeah, so when we're a full service, marketing and
Mhm.
advertising agency. When we started, we were predominantly a design agency, and that was not by design. But when you're young and you're scrappy, you go where the winds are. And we found a lot
Yep.
of early success in the design, branding, creative space. It's never where we wanted to stay. So over the past, 6 years, we have made a very intentional effort of scaling up the marketing and advertising paid social side of the company, and we've done so pretty successfully. Over the past 3 years, we've really grown into connected TV, programmatic, sort of mass media and brand partnerships. So now, we're just sort of constantly looking for that next level up. So, the past 3 years, we've negotiated deals with, between clients and people like Colin Cowherd and Stephen A. Smith and the UFC and, Newt Gingrich and different athletes and the rest of it. So we're always looking at where the next opportunity is for clients. There was a time where predominantly it was social. As social CPMs go up and we see return on ad spend come down because of the increased CPMs on social, as well as saturation in the market. Now we're saying, okay, what's that next thing? This we were doing 4.5x return on ad spend on this channel. This has dropped to 3.25x. How do we reallocate spend in different places to keep the campaigns profitable at a certain level? So our growth has been really organic and driven by what we see in the market and what's happening with our clients.
Okay. So, something you just brought up that I think people don't realize is you were saying like 4.5x return, 3x return. I don't think people understand what that really means. And I'm asking this for two reasons because I think most people are delusional when it comes to what the expected return should be. And
Yep.
secondly, I don't think people realize um, what you can expect when you spend your marketing dollars.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
what is a 4x return?
to keep it simple, 4x return is you put in $1, you get $4 back, right? You
Okay.
spend 10,000 on advertising and you get 40,000 back in advertising, right?
Hmm.
Um, early to mid Facebook ad days, Facebook was a gold mine.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, you're talking about
LinkedIn was
$7,
this.
$6.
Yeah.
Exactly.
LinkedIn was the same way.
Yeah, 100%. $7, $6 CPMs. Now, it's not uncommon to see 12, $15 CPMs, which means,
Mhm.
the cost of advertising, CPM, cost per 1,000 impressions, has almost doubled, if not tripled in certain cases. So if you increase the expense of a campaign and you're spending the same amount where you're getting less reach, that means your advertising spend is less effective than it used to be. Now, this is natural, right? This is going to happen in every industry. As a platform is successful, more people use it, the cost of it becomes more expensive. Same thing with Google
Mhm.
ads, right? Google is essentially just an auction. If I bid
Right.
$8 and then Gubby bids $9 and the next guy bids $10, it goes to the winner. Thus, more people using it makes the platform more expensive. So when I say return on ad spend, ROAS 3x, 4x, yes, like you said, it's important to be realistic. A 4x return on ad spend is pretty good by all accounts. You need to
Right.
make sure you're in a business where you're still profitable at 4x, which is not always the case, but that's essentially
Mhm.
what I'm referring to.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of our listeners are like small business owners. They're, you know, younger people trying to get started in
Yeah.
whatever industry. I mean, the whole purpose of this podcast was so people would learn about different things, right? Like it's the reason we've had plumbers on and funeral directors and, all over the map. But I think this field specifically, the marketing field, and 100% the social media marketing has gotten this over glorified hype over the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, right?
Yep.
Is, "Oh, everybody can do social media marketing. Everybody can go out and be a content creator." And, like, I don't think people have any idea the amount of money being spent on producing content and how little the return actually is on some of that, right? So, because everybody looks at guys like, Mr. Beast. We're
Right.
like, what, are you going to be the next Mr. Beast? Probably not, right?
Yep.
Like, let's be more realistic. But for every $1,000 you spend on production and getting it out there and all that stuff, you shouldn't be expecting to see much more than $3,000 to $4,000 back,
Yep.
right? Like that, and it's just so hard. I was talking to we had a guy on that used to be a teacher at one of the tech schools, and he's an IT guy. And he was saying, we have these kids that come in and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm just going to start a YouTube channel and then I'll be set in 5 years." And we're like, it's not that simple. Right? Like it's there's more to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I've built a seven-figure agency, and I didn't start creating content till a year ago, right? Like we built our company on the backs of paid advertising and paid media,
Mhm.
for the most of the time. In the early stages, it was on direct sales. We're cold calling, cold emailing because we had no
Yep.
advertising budget.
Right.
It make
It
that
was
model makes sense when it's two of you, because you don't need that many wins to be successful. But as the company grows and you scale, that model becomes less effective. It's not that you shouldn't still be incorporating it, but we use paid ads. I like paid ads because paid ads is predictable. I mean, you
yes.
mentioned a lot of the people that you work with are, smaller businesses, plumbers. It sounds like a lot of local service type businesses.
Mhm.
Well, it makes a lot of sense that Google Ads is such a core focus of what you do because those are high intent people. If someone is searching for something, they're going to Google or Yelp or other directories and they're typing in you name it near me, right? And
Right.
and if you are a plumber or doing HVAC or solar or you name it, you want to pop up when someone is typing that in, and that is a high intent person that is likely to convert if you've got a good process. Now, if you're going to go out there and start creating content around plumbing or solar or HVAC and all the rest of it, I'm not saying that you cannot be successful. As a matter of fact, you absolutely could be successful, but there are so many variables at play that you don't have control over. One, you are banking on your ability to conceptualize, concepts that are going to resonate with people. You're trusting that the algorithm is going to find your content appealing and push it out to a vast amount of people. And, anyone who creates content knows there's a massive learning curve. It takes a lot of time and testing and hours
Mhm.
and hours and hours. And while it can be very effective, it's not predictable in the same way that advertising is predictable.
Correct. It's yeah. But so as far as content generation in general though, now I'm curious on your take on that. Like if you were a small business and let's say you don't have the money to run paid ads, right? There are businesses out there that simply don't they they don't have the money, right? Like you and I probably didn't have it when we first started out. We found other ways to
Yep.
make it work. What would you say would be like the top 3 things that people should focus on if they can't afford paid ads when they're starting up?
Yep. So if you cannot afford paid ads when you're starting up, obviously this would change depending on the type of industry that you're in, but I'll just go
Mhm,
broad strokes, right? Like one, I believe that the CEO should always be the top salesperson in the company, right? Like
mhm,
that is your job as the CEO of the company is to sell. I have a very very close friend of mine. He was a groomsman in my wedding, and he's a general contractor. And I tell him every time we have dinner, you're spending way too much time doing work. Your job is to go out and get jobs and hire people to do work, or you're always going to end up in this hamster wheel of get a client, do the work, pipeline dries up, get a client, do the work,
mhm,
pipeline dries up, right? Whereas if you can find one or two people that you trust that you can delegate to and you do the work that you absolutely need to do at this stage until you get to the point where you can even hire for that. Like our company would not be as successful as it is, Gummy, if I was still the person running Facebook ads, right? Like
right,
there's a reason I have hired someone else, many other people to run Facebook and Google ads who are way better than that at I am. Can I do it? If everything fell apart and I had to get in platform and run Facebook and Google ads, yes, I can do it. But with everything that I do as a part of running a company, there's no way I am going to ever be better at platform execution than one person who is spending 40 hours a week doing just that, right? So, as the CEO of a business, if you don't have a paid ads budget, your number one job is to be the top salesperson of that company. Number
So
two,
go out there, do whatever you need to do.
do
Close
whatever
deals.
you need to do. Cold call, cold email, network, go to
Mhm.
mixers, go to chamber things, stop valuing your time. Don't think your time is worth anything unless people are paying you for it, right? Like, so if people are paying you 20 hours a week, that other 20 hours a week that no one is paying you to do anything is worth nothing. So you need to
Correct.
treat that as a resource that you will leverage at any cost to be able to go out and get business. Now, that changes as your company grows. If
Right.
you are busy 40 hours a week, now the calculus is, well, I'm not doing anything under X dollars amount, because this is what my baseline medium is. And I'm going to up my pricing, or I'm going to be more selective with the jobs that I take.
I think there's a lot of people that needed to hear this specific thing because I
Yeah.
run into startups all the time when they're like, "Well, my time is worth more than that." And I'm
No,
like,
it's not.
No, no, it's not.
Yeah.
If you're sitting here having coffee with me talking about nothing, your time is not worth more than that. You should
Yeah.
be out there
100%.
selling something to someone."
Yeah. Your
So what's
time
the
is
next
only
thing?
worth what people are paying you for it,
Correct.
So in our early days, I mean, I think it helped us by the fact that, Richard and I had quit our jobs, and, we were married, and we needed to, like, bring in money, and I did not value my time. I would sit in one of those stupid, like, little booths at a WeWork, and I would call people on page 2 of Google and say,
Mhm.
"Hey, did you know that you are really close to being on page 1? And if no one goes to page 2, and if you can get to page 1, this is going to be a massive boost in your business." And I would get greeted with a lot of "Don't call me," click,
Yep.
and I would just do it over and over and over again until we got wins. Like I said earlier, at that point, you didn't need that many wins for that strategy to be successful. And I had the time in the day. Now, I would never spend my time doing something like that, not because it's beneath me or below me, because the situation has changed and that no longer makes sense.
Correct. It's no longer resources well spent.
Yep, 100%.
So what's the next thing?
So the second thing I would tell them is assemble a team around you that is lean and that you trust. Right? The hardest part of my job, I've realized, has been hiring. Understanding as the company grows, who are the right people to partner with. I think early on, we made the mistake of trying to find people who were aligned from both the culture fit, that we can afford in the different positions, and sort of like investing in and building in. And it became a lot of work. As the company has scaled, what I've realized is, get people who are extremely self-motivated, who do not need to be micromanaged, who take a lot of ownership over what they're doing, who are paranoid about, client projects and customer projects, and that you can trust to leave, by themselves, and they're going to be able, it's only been in the last couple of years that I've been able to take vacations. I've
Mhm.
never taken vacations, in the history of the company, a weekend getaway here and there, because I always had this feeling that if I was not here or Richard was not here, things were going to fall apart. That
Yep.
has changed. And it's been eye opening to me that if you can assemble the right team of people around you, you invest in them, they trust you, they're aligned with the mission and the goal, you treat them well, you pay them well. Um, it is essential to scaling and growing a company.
Okay. So last question. If someone was getting into the marketing field and they were interested in doing what it is that you do or something similar,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you would tell them to focus on learning right now?
That's a really good question. I get this question a lot, especially in my DMs in Instagram from people who see my stuff on TikTok and
Oh, TikTok.
ask
Yeah.
questions. And I try and answer almost all of them, and give advice, because I wish that when I was starting off, I had someone that I can reach out to who's sort of done it.
Mhm.
Clearly, like, we're not where we want to be. We're still a growing company, but we've come quite a long ways. And here's what I generally tell people: marketing is a big word, and advertising is a big word, and there's lots of components under that. First, you need to find out what you like. I mean, do you want to go into design? Do you want to be in ad strategy? Do you want to be CMO route, where you are overseeing multiple aspects of a campaign? Find what you like, start small, and become an expert at it, right? So right now, unlike ever before, there are so many free resources for people to be able to really just learn and understand, and they should be consuming as much content as possible. If you are, wanting to get into paid advertising, you should be watching hours and hours and hours of videos on social advertising and Google Ads and the rest of it. You should be setting up ads manager accounts and Google Ads accounts and playing around. Even if you're not spending a dollar, you should be in platform playing around and trying to make sure you understand it. And then you should start doing work. I love freelancer to entrepreneur route
Mhm.
because you get to actually work in platform on real clients, and the risk is low for someone spending 1,000 or $2,000 a month on ads. Even if they're paying you next to nothing, for you it's a learning experience. Obviously do your best work, try and deliver for that client to the best of your abilities, but learn the work how you need to learn the work and grow from there. There's too many marketing people who want to get into marketing, advertising, and eventually build agencies that try to be an agency before they even understand what it is that they're doing. So start small, really, really become an expert at what you're doing, and then expand outwards in the direction it makes sense. So if you want to be, a graphic designer or a web developer, and you have taught yourself how to be, fairly competent in web development, the next thing that makes sense is probably copywriting, because that ties directly into web development. Or
Yep.
you can go the other route and you can go Google Analytics. Okay, I know how to generally build and design websites. Now let me learn GA and understand how data and performance of a website impacts the design of that website, right? Like, so I'm a big fan of starting somewhere and then expanding outwards.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on,
Yeah, it was a
and
pleasure. Thank you.
to everyone listening, we should be back shortly with another episode.